Silence falls before the altar. The priest asks, "Do you agree to take this man?" Marguerite de Valois remains silent. She turns her head away, not uttering a word. Then the King of France himself, her brother Charles IX, roughly presses his hand on his sister's head, forcing her to nod. Just like that, by force, a marriage was concluded that was supposed to become a symbol of peace. Tell me, can you build a future on a yes that's been forced out of someone's throat? Now let's rewind. Paris, August 1572. The city is hot and tense. The narrow streets are dark, but in the center, the Louvre is lit up with hundreds of candles. In the palace courtyard, glasses clink, music plays, and laughter mingles with the hum of conversation. This is not just a wedding. It is an agreement written not in ink, but in blood. Marguerite de Valois, sister of King Charles IX, is to marry Henry of Navarre, a Protestant. A marriage conceived as a symbol of peace between Catholics and Huguenots. An alliance that was supposed to reconcile France. At least that's how it looked on the outside. And now, a scene in the church. The bride is asked if she agrees to the marriage. And silence cuts through the space like a knife. Marguerite remains silent. They say she turned her head away. She did not say yes. The crowd before the altar freezes, the priest, courtiers, diplomats. What is this? Rebellion? Despair? Charles IX cannot bear it. The king, the bride's brother, himself presses her head roughly, forcing her to nod. And so, by force, the marriage was concluded. The wedding, which was supposed to be a sign of reconciliation, began with humiliation. A banquet is already being prepared at the tables in the Louvre. Silver glitters, wine flows like a river. Guests laugh and raise toasts. What do you think? Was the seed of disaster sown at that moment? For the wedding bells that rang in Paris that day did not yet know that they would become harbingers of death. The Louvre. Splendor and luxury fill the eyes. Tall candelabra glisten in gilded mirrors, and on the tables are pheasants, quails, marzipan, and Bordeaux wines. It was supposed to be a demonstration of France's power and grandeur. But let's take a closer look. Sitting at the same table are enemies who, just yesterday, sought to destroy each other. Enemies, Catholics and Protestants. Catholics saw the Huguenots as heretics who threatened their faith and power. And the Huguenots, Protestants, demanded freedom of religion and had taken up arms more than once. Their wars had flooded France with blood. And now they were sitting side by side at the same table. The Dukes of Guise were fanatical Catholics, the Black Falcons of the dynasty. Opposite them were the leaders of the Huguenots, Protestants who had come to the wedding unarmed, trusting the king. Wasn't this playing with their own fate? Charles IX was a young king, nervous, with a tremor in his voice. He would laugh, then clench his fists, as if he might explode at any moment. His mother, Catherine de' Medici, was dressed in black, like a shadow amid the gold and purple. Her gaze sweeps across the hall, and it seems that she sees everything, every whisper, every forced smile. She is followed by the reputation of the Black Widow, a poisoner, a master of intrigue. Is she not the real hostess of this celebration? The sounds of music drown out the tense conversations, but even amid the laughter, you can hear that the city outside the palace walls is in turmoil. Preachers in the streets have been shouting for days, heresy must be eradicated. Their words spread through the crowd like sparks through dry grass. And here's the question, what did the Huguenots feel as they raised their glasses among their enemies, knowing that Paris was breathing hatred? Wasn't this dinner like a last supper before the trial? For the banquet is still going on, but a conspiracy is already brewing in the corridors. And the smiles on their faces are only masks hiding fear and bloodlust. Paris had not yet recovered from the wedding celebrations when another sound shook the city, not bells, not music, but a gunshot. Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, leader of the Huguenots. He was not just the head of the Protestants, Coligny was the mentor of Henry of Navarre himself, Marguerite's fiancé, and a symbol of Protestant hope in France. The assassination attempt was a blow not only to the man, but to the whole idea of peace. That morning, Coligny was walking down the street after meeting with the king. The morning sun was touching the rooftops, the city was still sleepy. And suddenly, a flash, the thunder of an arquebus. The bullet hits him in the arm and jaw. Blood splatters on the stone. People scatter, shouting. Coligny falls, but he is alive. Alive. Was it a miracle? Or a warning? Everyone knew it was no accident. In Paris, you don't shoot just anyone. The hired assassin fled, but the name of the person who ordered the hit was no secret. All eyes immediately turned to the Dukes of Guise, the admiral's sworn enemies. The Huguenots gather in panic near his house. They demand justice. How is it possible that their leader was shot in the capital, under the protection of the king? Paris is buzzing like a volcano about to erupt. Charles IX promises, "We will find the culprits." His voice sounds uncertain. Because Catherine de' Medici is standing next to him. Her face is stone. She sees the assassination attempt not as a disaster, but as an opportunity. The Guise dukes press, "As long as they are here, there is danger. Destroy them, or they will destroy you." And here's the question, what was more frightening for the Huguenots, the bullet that did not kill their leader, or the silence that hung over the Louvre after the shot? Because this failed assassination attempt was the first step toward a tragedy that would change the face of France. Night. The Louvre is enveloped in silence, but candles are burning in one of the rooms. Their light casts long shadows on the walls, and these shadows resemble ghosts. Those who will decide the fate of France have gathered here. King Charles IX paces along the table like a caged lion. His hands tremble, his face is pale. He is young, but tired, torn. Before him stands his mother, Catherine de' Medici. Dressed in black, as always. She does not raise her voice, but her every word pierces her son's heart like a knife. "If we do not destroy them tonight," she whispers, "they will destroy us." It was not an empty threat. Religious wars had been raging in the country for several years. Catherine believed that either the king would strike first or lose his throne. Next to him are the Duke of Anjou, the king's brother, and Duke Henry Guise. Both lean toward Charles, repeating the same thing, "It is necessary. It is the only way." Charles shakes his head. He is struggling with himself. They say that at that moment he almost shouted, "I don't want this. I can't." But Catherine falls to her knees, embraces him like a child, and whispers, "Son, if you don't do this, tomorrow there will be neither you nor France." Silence. The roar of blood in his ears. And suddenly Charles breaks down. "Fine. Fine. Kill them all. All of them, so that no one can reproach me." Words spoken in the heat of the moment became a death sentence for thousands. Now imagine, dawn is approaching. Paris is still asleep. The bells are preparing for morning mass. But will the townspeople know that instead of prayer, they will be called to slaughter? Dawn on August 24th. St. Bartholomew's Day. Paris is still slumbering. The sky is gray, and a cool mist hangs over the streets. At this hour, the bells should be calling people to prayer. But these bells will sound as a signal to the killers. The first victim is Admiral Coligny. He has not yet recovered from the assassination attempt. He is lying in his own bed when the door is broken down with a bang. Soldiers burst in, drag him from under the covers, beat him, and cut him. His cries are lost in the darkness of the night. And then his body is thrown out of the window. The Duke of Guise is already waiting in the courtyard. He approaches, looks down, and says coldly, "It's him." He is handed a spear and touches the corpse to make sure. The leader of the Huguenots is dead. And just then, the bells of the church of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois begin to ring. Their rumble rolls through Paris, awakening the crowds. It is not a call to prayer. It is a sign that the time has come. In the palace, King Charles IX is said to have exclaimed, "Then kill them all, so that no one remains to reproach me." And the bells echo his cry. Paris awakens to a different reality. Were these the bells of a saint or the bells of death? And could anyone at that moment have stopped what had already begun? The bells had not yet fallen silent, and the streets were already filled with screams. Windows were opened, doors were broken down. Soldiers, townspeople, even children, all in one frenzied rush. Paris turned into a trap with no way out. Huguenots were sought out in their homes. Doors were broken down, people were dragged into the streets. Men are cut down right there on the pavement. Women are raped in front of their families and then killed too. Children are thrown into the Seine. Bodies fall into the river so thickly that boats cannot pass. Contemporaries wrote, "The water carried the dead like a raft." And no one stopped. No one called for mercy. After a few days, the water began to stink and rot from the corpses in the Seine. Chroniclers wrote that the authorities even ordered not to fish them out, so as not to spread even more contagion. Paris poisoned its own river. Even in churches, where prayers should have been heard, the cries of the doomed resounded. Prayers mingled with the sounds of sword striking. Paris, which had been dancing at a wedding just yesterday, was now drowning in its own hatred. Some were hanged from the windows of their own homes so that the crowd could see their deaths from afar. Others were dragged out of churches, where they begged for protection, and cut down on the steps to show that there was no longer any holy place, no hiding place. They say that the king first stood at the window of the Louvre and shot at people with an arquebus, as if on a hunt. Is this true? Or is it an exaggeration by chroniclers? We will never know. But the fact remains, the authorities gave permission. And the people set about carrying it out with fanatical fury. Because that night, Paris did not just shed blood. It lost its soul. When the slaughter subsided, the streets resembled not a city, but a battlefield without a battle. The dead hung from balconies, lay in ditches, and floated down the river. Paris had turned into an open cemetery, and it was in this state that news of the tragedy spread throughout Europe. And here's the question, what is more terrible, the order from above or the joy with which the lower classes rushed to slaughter their neighbors? News of the massacre spread across Europe faster than anyone could have imagined. Paris had not yet had time to remove the corpses from the streets, and Rome was already celebrating. Pope Gregory XIII ordered a solemn Te Deum to be sung in thanksgiving for the destruction of heretics. He even commissioned a commemorative medal. On one side was his profile, on the other, an angel striking Protestants with a sword. For Catholics, it was supposed to be a triumph. For Protestants, it was a symbol of the hypocrisy of the Church. England. Queen Elizabeth I, a Protestant, met the French ambassador in mourning. She made it clear, "We saw your wedding. Now we see your blood." Even those Catholic courts that were hostile to the Huguenots were stunned by the scale of the cruelty. The Venetian ambassador wrote in his report, "This is not politics, this is suicide for France. Because killing your own subjects in the capital means undermining the very foundation of royal power." France wanted to show Europe its strength. Instead, it showed its madness. And now the question is, what did Europe see in the bells of Paris? A celebration of faith or a funeral bell for the French monarchy itself? Several days passed. Paris calmed down, but the sky above the city still smelled of smoke and blood. Corpses were pulled from the Seine for weeks. According to rough estimates, between 3,000 and 5,000 Huguenots died in the capital. And across France, up to 30,000. Entire towns and villages were turned into mass graves. And yet, miraculously, Henry of Navarre, the young groom who had come to Paris to celebrate his wedding, survived. How? Only by renouncing his faith. He was given an ultimatum, Catholicism or death. He chose life. At least for the time being. After that night, Catherine de' Medici received a new name that has gone down in history, the Black Queen. For some, she was the savior of the dynasty, for others, a symbol of betrayal and treachery. But everyone agreed on one thing: without her, this massacre would not have happened. Charles IX himself could not forget that night. Chroniclers wrote that he was tormented by nightmares. He woke up screaming, saw rivers of blood, and whispered, "Blood, blood everywhere." It seemed to him that even the air of Paris was saturated with the stench of corpses. The Huguenots lost not only their leaders but also their trust. From then on, the king's word was worthless. The marriage agreement, which was supposed to reconcile France, proved that peace is impossible if it is cemented with blood. In the Protestant cities of Europe, that night became a living apocalypse. In Geneva, pamphlets were distributed depicting the massacre as the end of the world, and Catherine de' Medici was portrayed as a devil with a sword in her hands. For many, this was proof that the Catholic monarchy knew neither honor nor limits in its cruelty. So what was it? Catherine's cold calculation, sacrificing thousands to keep her throne? The fanatical hatred of the people, which broke free? Or the weakness of Charles IX, who was unable to stand up to his own mother? They say that even years later, bones and skulls were found in the Seine, reminding people of that night. Paris tried to move on, but for a long time, the city remained like a shadow bearing indelible bloodstains. Because in history, St. Bartholomew's Day is remembered not only as a massacre. It became a symbol of shattered trust. Imagine the final picture. Wedding bells, which were supposed to announce union and peace, became a signal for slaughter. The bed of the young bride turned into a coffin for thousands of her compatriots. Paris, the city of saints and heroes, was plunged into blood. The corpses in the Seine were like black candles floating past the walls, reminding everyone that religious hatred can drown an entire state. And since then, St. Bartholomew's Day has forever remained in Europe's memory as a night of betrayal and horror. And now the question. Can politics hide behind faith and remain pure? Who is to blame for the tragedy, Catherine de' Medici, who pressured the king? Charles IX himself, who gave in? Or the people who took up swords and attacked their neighbors? And most importantly, is peace really possible once trust has been destroyed? Because every era has its own St. Bartholomew's Day. Will we recognize ours when it comes?